The morning my mother told me to leave, the kettle was already boiling. I remember standing at the counter, one hand on the mug, watching steam fog the window. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look angry. She just said, "I've decided I can't live with you anymore." Then she added, almost casually, "I'm moving in with your brother." I didn't answer right away. I just turned the stove off and listened to the silence settle back into the apartment. A few minutes later, my phone vibrated with a notification from a moving company I hadn't contacted yet. I didn't understand why that detail would matter at the time. I just knew I would remember it later. My name is Rachel. I was 26 then, living in a small 2-bedroom apartment outside Portland, just me and my mother. My dad had passed away 3 years earlier. After that, my older brother Mark, who's 9 years older than me, got married and moved to another state. He and his wife Lena kept their distance. It was never hostile, just absent. So it became my mother and me. In the beginning, it felt natural. I worked downtown at a logistics firm, steady hours, steady pay. She had a part-time job at a library cafe. Evenings were quiet, the hum of traffic outside, the smell of detergent from the shared laundry room downstairs. We ate simple meals and watched reruns with the volume low. That didn't last. After I started working full-time, my mother quit her job. She said her knees hurt. She said she deserved to rest. I didn't argue, I just adjusted. I paid the rent. I covered utilities. Groceries went on my card. When her wallet came up short, I filled the gap. Slowly, the requests changed shape. "Rachel, where's dinner?" "Rachel, can you run to the store? I need a little extra this month, just a couple $100. She'd say it while sitting on the couch, remote in hand, eyes fixed on the screen. I'd hear it from the hallway, from my room, from the doorway when I was still wearing my work shoes. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself she had earned this after raising 2 kids alone once my dad got sick. I told myself family meant endurance. But there were moments that stayed with me, like opening my wallet and noticing bills missing, like finding my debit card moved from where I always kept it, like hearing, "I raised you," whenever I tried to speak up. One evening, after a long shift, I asked her quietly if she'd taken cash from my bag. She said she'd borrowed it. I asked her not to do that again. She looked at me then, really looked at me. "Do you know who you have to thank for your life?" she said. I didn't answer. I never did in those moments. I'd just nod, or step back, or let the conversation dissolve on its own. Silence was easier than arguing with someone who believed history was a permanent debt. I could have moved out. Financially, it wouldn't have hurt. But she was my last parent. Leaving felt like erasing something final. Then, one night, I came home and saw unfamiliar shoes by the door. Mark was in the living room, leaning back like he owned the place. Lena sat beside him, scrolling on her phone. My mother was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. That was the night everything shifted. I went to my room early and closed the door. Through the wall, I could hear low voices, laughter. My name mentioned once, then dropped. I sat on the edge of my bed and waited, not knowing yet what I was waiting for. Mark and Lena didn't leave that night. I woke up the next morning to the sound of cabinets opening and closing, unfamiliar footsteps moving through the kitchen like they'd already memorized the space. The smell of coffee drifted down the hall, sharper than usual. I stayed in my room longer than I needed to, listening. When I finally stepped out, Mark was sitting at the table, legs stretched, scrolling on his phone. Lena leaned against the counter, mug in hand. My mother moved between them, light on her feet, asking if the coffee was strong enough, if they'd slept well. No one asked me anything. "Didn't know you were coming," I said, keeping my voice even. Mark glanced up. We were in the area. Lena smiled without warmth. "Thought we'd check on Mom." My mother nodded quickly, like that settled it. From that day on, they started showing up more often. At first it was weekends, then midweek evenings. Sometimes they stayed for dinner, sometimes they stayed late enough that it felt pointless to ask when they were leaving. They treated the apartment differently than I did. Mark kicked his shoes off wherever he stood. Lena used the bathroom drawers without asking. My mother watched it all with quiet approval, as if their presence rewrote the rules of the space. One night, after a long shift, I came home to find Mark sprawled on the couch. "Hey," he said, not looking up. What's for dinner? I paused, bag still on my shoulder. This is my place, I said, not sharply, just clearly. He laughed. You're still hung up on that? Lena chimed in from the kitchen. You're so tense, Rachel. You know, with that attitude, you'll scare people off. My mother didn't say anything. She just reached for another plate. I stopped eating with them after that. I'd take my food into my room, sit on the bed, and eat slowly while the noise from the living room leaked under the door. Their voices rose and fell. Sometimes I heard my name, sometimes I didn't. A few days later, I finally asked my mother what was going on. She didn't hesitate. I've decided I'm moving in with Mark and Lena. The words landed flat, like she'd rehearsed them. I stared at her. You said you never wanted to live with them. That was before, she said. Things change. Mark showed up that same evening, as if on cue. It's only right, he said, standing with his arms crossed. I'm the oldest. I should take care of Mom. Lena nodded beside him. We'll handle it from here. No one asked what I thought. I tried once more, quietly, to point out how sudden it all was, how they hadn't visited in years, how this didn't feel planned so much as convenient. My mother's face hardened. People who just leech off their parents shouldn't complain, she said. That was the moment something inside me went still. I didn't argue, I didn't explain. I just nodded and went back to my room. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I didn't feel angry, I felt focused. I made a list, not of revenge, of facts, documents, dates, accounts. I worked quietly long after the apartment fell asleep. When I finally closed the laptop, the room was dark, and the only sound was the hum of the fridge through the wall. Then I waited. The next week passed in a strange calm. Mark and Lena acted as if the decision had already been finalized. They came and went freely, bringing groceries they didn't pay for, leaving dishes in the sink. My mother followed their lead, speaking to me only when necessary, usually to point out something I hadn't done yet. I didn't push back. Instead, I started organizing. Every evening after work, I'd sit at my desk with the lamp on low. I pulled bank statements from my email, rent confirmations, utility bills, old transfer records. I didn't print anything yet. I just saved copies, labeled clearly, and placed them into a single folder on my laptop. I also reviewed the lease. My name was the only one on it. Always had been. I remembered signing it after my dad passed. My mother sitting beside me at the kitchen table, saying it was easier this way because my credit was better. At the time, that felt like a small, practical decision. Now it felt like something else. I checked the expiration date, 2 weeks out. I didn't mention it. Mark eventually noticed my silence. You're taking this pretty well, he said one afternoon, watching me pack my lunch for work. I don't see a reason not to, I replied. That seemed to irritate him more than anger would have. My mother started dropping comments instead, small ones, about how lonely I'd be, about how people my age should already be married, about how hard life was going to be once I was on my own. I listened. I nodded. I let her talk. Then I booked a moving company. I did it during my lunch break, sitting in my car, engine off, phone balanced against the steering wheel. I chose a date that worked with my lease. I didn't rush. I didn't bargain. When the confirmation email came through, I didn't feel relief. I felt clarity. At home, boxes began to appear in my room. Mark noticed them first. Already packing? He asked. I like to plan ahead, I said. He smirked. Guess that's your thing. Lena suggested, half joking, that I leave some furniture behind. You won't need everything, right? I didn't answer. The closer moving day got, the lighter I felt. Not emotionally, physically. I slept better, ate better. My shoulders stopped carrying that constant tightness I hadn't realized was there. The night before the move, my mother stood in my doorway. You don't have to rush, she said. You can leave things here if you want. I won't, I replied. She watched me for a moment like she was trying to read something on my face and couldn't find it. Then she turned and walked away. The next morning, the movers arrived early. Mark stood near the door, arms crossed, wearing a satisfied look. My mother sat on the couch. Lena leaned against the wall, scrolling on her phone. I let the movers take everything from my room first. When they finished, I paused, then pointed toward the living room. "Those two," I said calmly. That was when the room finally reacted, and I waited for them to finish talking. At first, they thought I was joking. Mark laughed once, short and sharp. "What do you mean, those two?" I looked at the movers, then back at him. "The TV, the sofa, the dining table, all of it." Lena straightened. "Rachel, stop playing around." My mother stood up. "Have you lost your mind? That's our furniture." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain yet. I just nodded to the movers so they wouldn't pause. Mark stepped closer, his face flushing. "You can't do that. How are we supposed to live here with nothing?" I took a breath and shifted gears. Not emotionally, structurally. I had already decided how this would go. Step 1, don't argue about feelings. Step 2, state ownership clearly. Step 3, let the system do the rest. "This apartment," I said, "is leased under my name. The furniture was purchased with my account. Every item." "That's a lie," my mother said quickly. My father's inheritance was spent years ago," I said gently. "You know that." The room went quiet. Mark turned to her. "Mom?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes dropped to the floor. Lena's expression changed first. "Wait, you told us—" "I said what I needed to say," my mother muttered. "So we could be together." Mark's jaw tightened. "You said this place was basically yours." "It is," I said. "Legally, financially." I reached into my bag and pulled out my folder. I didn't open it yet, I just held it. "The rent," I continued, "has been paid from my account since the beginning. Utilities too. Monthly support transfers." I paused. "Consistently." No one interrupted me this time. Lena broke the silence. "So, there's no inheritance?" I shook my head. "No." Mark stepped back like the floor had shifted. "Then why would we—" He stopped himself, but the sentence didn't need finishing. My mother looked up at him then, her face pale. "You said you wanted to take care of me." He didn't answer. The movers stood awkwardly by the door, waiting. I gave them a small nod to continue. As the sofa was lifted, Lena spoke again, fast this time. "Okay, new plan. Rachel, you don't have to move out. We can all stay, together." My mother nodded eagerly. "Yes, that's better," Mark added. "You're good at handling things anyway." I closed the folder and put it back in my bag. "No," I said, not harshly, just final. I picked up my keys and walked toward the door. Behind me, voices overlapped, confused, urgent, suddenly cooperative. I didn't turn around. In the hallway, I paused long enough to hear the apartment door close behind me. Then I stepped into the elevator and let the doors slide shut. The final conversation happened later that afternoon. I was supervising the last load when Mark followed me down to the parking lot. The air smelled like wet concrete. A delivery truck idled nearby, engine humming low and steady. "Rachel," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "Let's talk." I stopped beside my car and faced him. I didn't lean, I didn't cross my arms, I just waited. "You didn't have to do it like this," he continued. "You embarrassed Mom." "I didn't," I said. "I moved out." "That wasn't the point," he snapped, then caught himself. "We're family," I nodded once. "That's why I was careful." He looked at me like he was searching for an opening. "You could have warned us." "I did," I said, "for years." He fell silent. My mother came down a few minutes later. She moved slower than usual, holding the railing as she descended the steps. When she reached us, she didn't look at me right away. "I never thought you'd turn out like this," she said. I met her eyes. "I didn't either." She inhaled sharply. "After everything I've done." I didn't argue the past. I didn't deny it. I simply said, "That doesn't give you ownership of my future." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her shoulders sagged. Lena didn't come down. That told me enough. "I'll give you some time," Mark said finally. "You'll cool off." "I won't," I replied. There was no anger in my voice, just certainty. I handed my spare key to the building manager later that evening and signed the lease termination papers. The process took less than 10 minutes. Dates, initials, signatures, clean and procedural. 2 weeks later, the lease expired. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Mark and Lena had to move quickly. No furniture, no savings cushion. My mother hadn't gone back to work. The three of them ended up in a smaller place across town. I didn't follow up. I set up my new apartment instead. 1 bedroom, light walls, quiet street. I unpacked slowly, choosing where each thing went. There was no rush anymore. One evening, a few days after everything was settled, my phone rang. It was my mother. I looked at the screen for a moment. Then I turned the phone face down and went back to washing the mug in my sink. The water ran warm over my hands. Then I dried them and sat down. A week later, I heard the rest through someone else. A former neighbor ran into me at a grocery store not far from my new place. We stood near the freezer aisle, the low hum of the compressors filling the space between us. "I heard about your mom," she said carefully. I nodded once. She moved. "Yeah," she replied. "It sounds difficult." That was the word people used when they didn't want to say predictable. From what I was told, Mark was the only one working. Long hours, early mornings. My mother and Lena clashed almost immediately. They both had strong opinions about how a home should be run, and neither of them liked being told what to do. Money became a problem fast. There was no inheritance, no safety net, just rent, bills, and expectations that didn't match reality. Arguments became routine, doors slammed, neighbors complained. My mother tried calling again after that first attempt, then texting, then leaving a voicemail I didn't listen to all the way through. The message was fragmented, apologies mixed with blame, regret tangled with urgency. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something simple. I reviewed my finances. Without the monthly transfers, my savings grew quickly. I paid off a lingering balance I'd been carrying for years. I set up an automatic transfer into an account labeled Future. I didn't attach a goal to it, just space. I also made rules for myself. Rule 1, no conversations without boundaries. Rule 2, help is not the same as rescue. Rule 3, silence is allowed. One afternoon, I gathered every remaining document related to my family finances, old statements, records, notes, and placed them in a single envelope. I didn't destroy them. I labeled the envelope and filed it away. That chapter didn't need revisiting. The last message I received from my mother came late one evening. "I can't live like this," she wrote. "Please come back." I read it once. Then I locked my phone and set it aside. I wasn't angry. I wasn't satisfied. I was done. That night, I made tea and sat by the window. Outside, a light rain tapped against the glass. Inside, everything was quiet, orderly. For the first time in years, my space felt like it belonged to me. Life settled into a rhythm after that. Nothing dramatic, just steady. I wake up early now, usually before my alarm. I open the windows, let the air move through the apartment, and make coffee the way I like it. Slow, no rush. On weekends, I clean without hurrying. I fold laundry while listening to quiet music. Sometimes I walk to a small park nearby and sit on a bench with no purpose other than being there. No one asks me for money anymore. No one checks my bag. No one reminds me of what I owe. I still think about my mother from time to time, not with guilt, not with anger, just awareness. I understand now that love without limits eventually turns into control, and control always demands a price. Choosing myself didn't make me heartless, it made me honest. A few months ago, a coworker stayed late with me after work. We were locking up when she mentioned, almost casually, that her parents had started using her credit card just until things got better. She laughed it off, but her hands tightened around her keys. I didn't give advice, I just listened. Sometimes people don't need answers. They need to see that another ending is possible. If you made it this far, thank you for sitting with my story. If it helped you feel a little less alone, that matters. If you'd like to support this channel, gently tap like and subscribe. It really does help this community grow. And if you're comfortable, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I read those more than you'd think. 2 more stories will be waiting for you next. Take care of yourself until then.